If you're feeling bogged down by the impossible expectations or the noise of new year, new me, take a second to pause. Grow Therapy gives you space to slow down, check in, and start the new year from a more grounded place. Whether it's your first time in therapy or your 50th, Grow makes it easier to find a therapist who fits you, not the other way around. They connect you with thousands of independent licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions, nights and weekends. You can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, identity, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. And if something comes up, you can cancel up to 24 hours in advance at no cost. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session. Grow helps you find therapy on your time. Whatever challenges you're facing, Grow Therapy is here to help. Grow accepts over 100 insurance plans, including Medicaid in some states. Sessions average about $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0, depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/booknow today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/booknow. growtherapy.com/booknow. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan.
This is episode 45 of That Shakespeare Life.
Hello, I am Helen Ostovich, Professor Emerita of English and Cultural Studies at McMaster University. Another great method for studying the life of William Shakespeare includes listening to this. It's That Shakespeare Life with my friend Cassidy Cash.
They used animal fats or tallow, so you can imagine how smelly they would have been, and they were generally used for the laundry, so not for your body. But Castile soap was a white hard soap, so very similar to what we use today. So if you could afford it, you used that to wash your body with.
Welcome to That Shakespeare Life with Cassidy Cash. Cassidy believes that if you desire to successfully learn or perform Shakespeare's plays, then understanding the real life and history of William Shakespeare himself is a must. That Shakespeare Life is the podcast that helps you go beyond the curtain of some of Shakespeare's most iconic works and explore the world of early modern England as Shakespeare would have lived it, learning from the writers, historians, and performers who know it best. And now, here's Cassidy.
While many of the castles and great homes of the monarchy in England already contained luxurious bathrooms, it would be Henry VIII, in a style true to his flamboyant reputation, that would create elaborately accessorized bathrooms for palaces like Whitehall and Hampton Court. While these bathrooms were used by the monarchy in Shakespeare's life, such as Queen Elizabeth, and speak to the general Tudor opinion of how important it was to keep clean, the average Tudor and Shakespeare himself had a much simpler version of bathing, not to mention a variety of myths and legends to accompany popular opinion of what it meant to keep clean. Here to walk us through a brief history of soaps, bathing, and the act of cleanliness in Shakespeare's lifetime is Natalie Grueniger. Natalie is the host of the Talking Tudors podcast, as well as the author of the blog On the Tudor Trail. I've asked Natalie to visit with us today to talk with us about two excellent articles she wrote specifically about Tudor bathing, examining the common practices, methods of making soap, and the inside details about those elaborate bathrooms in Whitehall Palace. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Hello, Cassidy. It's so lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Was bathing an everyday occurrence in Tudor England?
Well, bathing as we know it, fully immersing oneself in water, was not an everyday, occurrence in Tudor England. However, this isn't to say that the Tudors were not interested in personal hygiene. In fact, you only need to read some of the household manuals of the day, like Hugh Platt's fabulous Delights for Ladies, which include recipes for soap and washing waters, to see that they were very much interested in personal cleanliness, more so than we often give them credit for, I think. But I think we need to make a distinction between bathing and washing, which was something, I suppose, more akin to a sponge bath. And that is definitely something the Tudors did. How often exactly, though, is kind of impossible to know. But why wasn't it an everyday thing? Well, I guess apart from the practical challenges of bathing, there was also a school of thought at the time that believed that bathing was actually dangerous. So during the early modern period, it was thought that you could contract certain diseases, including
from getting a bath?
Including really nasty stuff like the sweating sickness and smallpox, by breathing in the miasma, or like they called it, the ill air. So as Andrew Board warned his readers in his book, A Compendious Regiment or Dietary of Health, which was published in 1576, there is nothing except poison that doth putrefy or doth corrupt the blood of man, and also doth mortify the spirits of a man, as doth a corrupt and contagious air. So apart from breathing in this noxious air, disease could also enter the body through open pores. So the physician Thomas Moulton, in his This is the Mirror of Glass of Health, advised readers to use no baths or stoves, nor sweat too much, for all openeth the pores of a man's body, and maketh the venomous air to enter, and for to infect the blood. So physicians of the age instead advised just to wash your hands and your face with cold water first thing in the morning and before every meal. And people of all classes took really great care to change their linens and their undergarments regularly, because this was the layer that touched the skin, and so it was essential for good health. And
so
furthermore,
I guess if there's this fear of getting a bath, we need to touch on what exactly was involved in getting a bath. Now, you said it was just washing your hands and your face, but did they never cleanse the rest of their body?
Yeah, no, they did definitely. So in order to have a bath, most Tudors would have had to, you can just imagine it, find some sort of tub, normally a wooden tub, collect buckets of water, heat the water by the fireplace, and fill the tub. Are you tired already? Because I am just
exactly, because you've got to haul all of that, right? There's not like...
Well, exactly. So it's probably safe to assume that this very complicated process dissuaded people from bathing, regularly every day. If you were going to all this trouble, though, it also meant that usually the baths were shared or used by more than one person.
Oh, which might explain the diseases.
Well, yeah, it could have had something to do with it. And the water may have also been scented. They were very much into scenting water with herbs and flowers. So interestingly, in a book called The Book of Nurture by John Russell, this was published in the 15th century, he describes how bathtubs should be set up for royalty at the time. So he says that it should be lined with cloth, which was probably linen sheets, and sprinkled with herbs and flowers. He also mentions sponges for the sovereign to sit on, so that's quite comfy, and a tent constructed over the top. Maria Haywood, in her excellent book, Dress at the Court of Henry VIII, states that once out of the tub, the bather, so the monarch, was rinsed with rose water, which was a favourite scent of the Tudors. So that doesn't sound too bad, does it?
No, that you're going to be smelling very nice at the end of that. But now, okay, that's a lot of herbs and lining with the sheets, but I want to ask about a particular soap. Now, on her blog, Natalie references Alison Sims' book about Tudor hygiene, mentioning Castile soap and that it was reserved for the wealthy classes. Now, Natalie, I have a Castile soap here at my house, but is that the same kind of soap?
Well, it's actually similar. It's similar, although the recipe's been, changed and refined over the centuries. Originally, Castile soap was made with 100% virgin olive oil as its main ingredient, whereas today you'll find variations. There's like hemp and coconut oil included, and even things like lemongrass and tea tree. So interesting, Castile soap has actually been around since the time of the Crusades. It was influenced by an even older recipe for soap, which originated in Aleppo in Syria. And the main ingredients of the Aleppo soap are olive oil and laurel oil. So this soap made its way to Europe during the Crusades, but because it was imported, once the stores ran out, people adapted the recipe using whatever they had around.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And minus the laurel oil, which was really difficult to source. So by the 12th century, many cities like Italy and Spain, they were producing soap based on this original Aleppo soap. But eventually the soap that kind of outshone the rest was the Castile soap, and it became renowned for its quality and its many uses. So from Castile in Spain is why it's called Castile soap.
The city, okay.
And it became very popular with Spanish royalty. And subsequently, of course, all the other European houses had to be like, well, if that's the best, then we want the best as well.
Doing it, yeah.
So there were cheaper soaps, but they used animal fats or tallow. So you can imagine how smelly they would have been. And they were generally used for the laundry, so not for your body. But Castile soap was a white hard soap, so very similar to what we use today. So if you could afford it, you used that to wash your body with.
Was it cut into bars the way soap is today? When you say it was
I think that one was, yeah.
Okay.
I believe the Castile soap was, yeah.
Now, I thought indoor plumbing, we were talking about hauling the water up to fill a tub for a bath. And I thought that indoor plumbing had not been invented by the 16th century. But Natalie mentions that, quote, the only Tudors lucky enough to have permanent plumbing and luxurious bathrooms were royalty. And you go on to describe, I believe it's Henry VIII's bathrooms.
Yes.
Could you explain to me? I was so surprised by this because I didn't think indoor plumbing existed, but there was apparently indoor plumbing for bathrooms during Shakespeare's lifetime.
Yeah, there was. And they were quite sophisticated and luxurious bathrooms at Hampton Court Palace, for example, at the Tower, at Windsor, at Newhall, at Whitehall, and even some, they're all major houses, obviously, but even some of the king's smaller houses had quite sophisticated bathrooms. So I know it's very surprising when you say indoor plumbing, people are like, well, but there were, of course, this was only for royalty and very
not
wealthy.
A widespread thing. This was just...
No.
Did Henry VIII start this? Did he bring it in, or was it there already?
There was already quite sophisticated bathing in the 15th century, but he definitely improved it, to something more akin to what we know today, I suppose.
Now, we should point out that Henry VIII is Queen Elizabeth's father. So did Elizabeth continue using these bathrooms during her reign?
Yes, she would have, because Henry VII, let's go back to Henry VII. So he would have had some sort of sophisticated bathrooms as well, except that the bathtubs were different. They were kind of made of, they were like old-fashioned tubs. And still at that time, they were made of wood and would have been filled with buckets. So this is Henry VII.
And when you say built of wood, you're talking basically a really big barrel. Is that right?
Exactly. And they were made by the same people that make the barrels, the Coopers.
Okay.
So that's exactly right. So in 1529, Henry acquires Hampton Court, and we've just mentioned Hampton Court before.
Yes.
So he orders a new bathroom for Hampton Court, and that was situated in a 3-story suite called the Bain Tower. This was an absolute luxurious suite, and Simon Thurley describes it. He tells us what's on there, and it says, so the ground floor was an office and a strong room. The floor above contained his bedroom and a bathroom, and a private study. And the bathroom, sounds really, really lovely, had deep window seats with cupboards beneath and a ceiling decorated with gold battens on white background. The baths were made by a cooper, as we just mentioned, so they are the people that actually make and repair casks and barrels, and was attached to the wall, supplied by 2 taps. So this is exactly like what ours look like.
It's very modern, yes.
Yeah, one for cold, one for hot. The difference is that directly behind the bathroom, in another small little room, was a charcoal-fired stove or a boiler. Now, this is fed from a cistern on the 2nd floor, which was filled by the Coombe conduit. And actually, just as a side note, you can still visit the remains of the Coombe conduit today. It's in the care of English Heritage.
This exact one that you're describing he would have used is still there?
Not the bathroom, the conduit.
Oh, okay. I'm with you. Okay.
That's okay. So later on in Henry's reign, in addition to these tubs, we actually get sunken pools and baths. So they were quite extravagantly furnished as well, with luxurious towels and bathrobes and beds as well. So it's a little bit like our going to a spa experience, or, something like that.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. And the bathroom in this particular tower was later replaced. So you're asking about Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. This was replaced with a new bathroom under the King's Long Gallery at Hampton Court. So when Elizabeth came to the throne and she stayed at Hampton Court, she didn't use the Queen's rooms. She used the King's rooms. Yeah.
Right.
And she stayed. So she would have used this King's Gallery. And of course, she would have used the bathroom that was under there as well. Interestingly, it was when the Queen was at Hampton Court in 1562, she became unwell. It was 10th of October, and she started feeling sick. And she took a bath. She wanted to feel a bit better. So she thought, I'll take a bath. And it was probably in this bathroom under the King's Gallery. But anyway, the next day, the poor thing, it turned out, of course, to be the early stages of smallpox.
Oh, no. Well, okay. But now we've got this elaborate sounding bathroom, and it's elaborate for modern standards in terms of investment in cleanliness. But Elizabeth specifically is kind of infamous for having horrible teeth. Now, was this focus on cleanliness that people did for their bodies and their undergarments, did they not give that same kind of care to their teeth?
No, I think they definitely did. And I think we have to remember that cleanliness was associated with respectability. So if you wanted to be respectable and seen as a respectable person, you had to look after your hygiene. So again, I think if you want to be viewed as respectable, then this definitely extended to your teeth. And the fact that Elizabeth's teeth were not great was not because dental hygiene was not considered important. It actually had to do with the introduction of sugar into the diet of the wealthy. So what people aimed for was exactly the same as what we aim for today, sweet smelling breath. And there were actually various ways in which you could achieve this. So again, if you go back to the etiquette manuals, which are fab, of the day, they encourage people to rinse their mouths first thing in the morning. So you're washing your face, you're giving yourself a little bit of a wipe down, you're rinsing your mouth, you're actually combing your hair as well. That's mentioned in all the books. And you were encouraged after you ate to use something like a toothpick, some sort of implement, to remove any fragments of food from your teeth. So it was not seen as polite to do this with your knife or your fingers. So you had to use an actual implement. An item you may have heard of, traditionally associated with Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII, which is housed today at the Victoria and Albert Museum, is a gold and enamel whistle pendant. And it's said to have been one of his first gifts to her. This actually contains a set of tooth and ear picks, very charming gift.
Yes, quite sweet.
Yeah, and there are other similar items that survive. So, for example, at the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, they have a silver grooming tool, which on one end has an ear scoop, and on the other end is a combination of nail and nail cleaner and toothpick. So people were obviously aware of the connection between leaving bits of food in your mouth and decaying gums and tooth decay and smelly breath. And I think that they did whatever possible not to have to visit the barber surgeon. Now, they didn't use toothbrushes. A lot of people ask that question, but they did use linen toothcloths. So linen was very good. They also used linen to give themselves a good body scrub as well. So even if you weren't bathing every day, you did a bit of a sort of exfoliation type thing with your linen cloth as well. And then you had another little one to wipe your teeth with. So you could just rub the cloth all over your teeth and gums before rinsing, or you could use it with a tooth powder. So in her very entertaining and informative book, How to Be a Tudor, Ruth Goodman talks about the range of powders that were used by the Tudors. And these included soot, chalk, salt, and ashes from burnt rosemary wood. So many Elizabethan recipes for tooth powders also included cloves, because apart from the strong scent, they also have an antiseptic and analgesic properties. And they're actually still used today in many natural remedies for tooth decay. So if you could afford it, you could visit the barber surgeon, and generally he, would give you a good tooth scraping as well, or a tooth bleaching if you wanted that.
So kind of pre-dentistry.
Yeah.
Where did they get the soap that they were bathing with? I mean, I would assume there were shops where you could purchase it, but mass production and industry didn't exist yet. So where would Shakespeare have gotten his soap?
Yeah, well, look, if you had household staff, like I mentioned before, there were lots of recipe books. So people obviously making their own soap. So
actually,
if he had any
at their house.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But you could also buy it. There were around three types that you could purchase. So obviously the expensive one we talked about, and then a couple of other cheaper options.
Would they smell as nice? Why were they cheaper?
They wouldn't smell as, no. I think the Castile soap and the Mediterranean varieties would have smelled quite nice, because they're the ones that have olive oil as their base. But the other ones using the animal fat, yeah, I don't think that would have been quite
nice
pleasant.
Smelling, but they get you clean, so they're cheaper.
Yeah. They were good for the laundry, very good for the laundry.
Now, Natalie's blog on Tudor hygiene also mentions that clean linens indicated respectability, but that there was a distinction about white linens indicating a person's wealth. Now, Clorox was not around back then, and neither was commercial bleach. So how did people in the 16th century bleach their linens and keep them white?
Yeah, I know. It's quite amazing, isn't it? But so there were a couple of ways. So after soaking your linen in lye, which they used a lot, which was like a strong alkaline solution, and then rinsing it out, it was often just hung out to bleach, I suppose, naturally in the sun. Or, you'd hang it over a bush, or you would wet, once you had washed it and had the lye alkaline solution, you hung it out over a bush, then you sort of repeatedly wet it and let the sun bleach it that way. But there's another interesting way of bleaching. In her book, The Tudor Housewife, which is another fabulous book, Alison Sim states that human urine was used for bleaching linen. And this was actually used from, centuries before that, to be honest. And it wasn't the Tudors came up with this. So they used human urine to bleach because it was a cheap source of ammonia. And it was, again, they often combined it with the lye, that strong alkaline solution. And this was all done in a wooden tub. So there was no boiling. I think later we get, in the Victorian times, there's sort of this boiling, image of people around a boiling tub. No, they did a little bit differently. But it wasn't just great for bleaching your linens, actually. it was also used as a bit of a spot cleaner. So while we might spray something on today, they used a little bit of urine to...
No, you're kidding. It seems like that would defeat the entire purpose of this focus on smell good that they seem to have.
Yeah, that's right. No wonder they needed all those herbs after.
Exactly. Wow.
What
about William Shakespeare? I mean, I know he lived kind of a dual life. He has this life in Stratford, and then he has one in London, and the day-to-day activities are different depending on where you're at. But would Shakespeare, he had a fairly wealthy status. Would he have had bleached linens?
I think considering that it was a mark of one's respectability and wealth and social standing, I'm not an expert on Shakespeare, but I think what I do know is that he wanted to be seen as someone of a high standing. So I think he would have gone to the extra expense. There is no inventory of his goods to survive, so I can't say that he had exactly this many shirts and that he owned this many at the time of his death. However, I think there is enough evidence to suggest that he was keen to boost his social standing. And we can just look at one example. In October 1596, he obtained a coat of arms for his father, which he later used once his father passed away. And some people estimate that he may have paid as much as £20 for this particular coat of arms, which is a substantial amount for those days. It's kind of roughly what a skilled tradesman earned in a year, or what the royal apothecary earned in 2 years, actually. So this is a lot of money to just, fork out on something like that. So I think he would have had his shirts bleached.
Status would definitely have mattered to William Shakespeare. Now, So one day when we hopefully find an inventory list buried in history somewhere, we wouldn't be surprised to find something like that. No. But I wonder also about cologne. Was cologne something that men did specifically in Tudor England, and would Shakespeare have worn cologne?
Well, I think if we're talking about like something that you apply to your skin directly, like a perfumed essential oil.
I think that's what I was talking about, because there was this focus on smelling nice. I wondered if it was about, just scenting your clothes and your bath oils, or if they would scent their selves as well.
Yeah, if you could afford it, you would definitely apply something to yourself as well, because we've already mentioned the fact that air quality was really important to the Tudors. They thought that smells could cause illness or alter your health in some way, whether for good or bad.
Okay.
So the smell, we know the smell of rosemary, for example, which we see in Shakespeare's plays, was believed to boost memory. So the majority of people would have used natural sources to sweeten the air in their homes, like a posy of, fragrant flowers, or a linen bag filled with flowers or something like that. They would have also used plants and herbs to improve the smell of their clothing, like we've mentioned, so tucking something in here, rubbing something there. The wealthy also used these, but pomanders were another very popular accessory in Tudor times, and these were like little bags, or sometimes boxes, filled with a ball of herbs and spices, made by combining the ingredients with something sticky like wax or resin, and hung from a cord. So as you walked, all the nice scent sort of followed you. The wealthier you were, the more elaborate the receptacle. And if you want to see some examples, just have a look at some of the portraits of Mary and Elizabeth. They have their pomanders in those, and they're quite amazing, jeweled, beautiful things. But the more concentrated perfumes or essential oils that you could put directly onto your skin were very expensive, especially at the beginning of the 16th century. So only really available to the very wealthy again, and because they were imported. So anything imported is just for the kind of elite wealthy. But towards the end of the Tudor reign, we have this sort of homegrown production thing that's happening. So the price drops a little, although still using imported ingredients. So you still have to have a bit of money for this. During Henry VIII's reign, rose oil apparently was the king's favourite scent. But as Goodman mentions in her book, by the end of the reign, people are looking for more complex blends of ingredients. So generally things including musk, civet, and ambergris, they're becoming very popular. So maybe this is something like what Shakespeare wore.
That's fascinating, because ambergris is a perfume ingredient today as well.
It is, absolutely.
Well, we would love to learn more about this topic, and you have already mentioned several good resources, but I do want to ask you, what are your favorite resources that you might recommend for us to learn more?
Well, I've probably mentioned most of it, but I'll give you a little list. So I think I've already, and these are, before I give you the books, I do recommend that people try and go back to some primary sources. They're so much fun. The etiquette books of the day, the Tudors loved etiquette manuals, recipe books. So you can actually find some online. I've mentioned a few in the talk. They're just a lot of fun, and then you get it firsthand. But if you want to just read some other books by great historians, I definitely recommend The Private Lives of the Tudors, which is by Tracy Borman. Lots of juicy detail about everyday life. I mentioned How to Be a Tudor by Ruth Goodman. This is fabulous, lots of fun. The Tudor Housewife by Alison Sim. Actually, anything by Alison Sim is fantastic. The Tudor Tailor by Nina Michaela and Jane Malcolm Davies. Again, any of their books are just awesome. I love them, and they've got some new ones coming out. The Time Traveller's Guide to Elizabethan England. If you're interested in what Shakespeare's daily life was like, I highly recommend Ian Mortimer's book. Elizabeth's London by Lisa Pickard is another fantastic book if you want to know what daily life was like. And then one more, one of my all-time favorites, The Royal Palaces of Tudor England by Simon Thurley.
Wonderful. We will link to all of these books, as well as several that you mentioned during our talk today, in the show notes for today's episode. Now, we ask everyone this next question here at That Shakespeare Life, and that's, what's the one book you would take with you on a deserted island? My friends in England tell me I'm supposed to allow you the complete works of Shakespeare and a copy of the Bible, so your choice would be in addition to those.
This is very tricky. My goodness, one other book. Now, I hope it's all right that I'm not going to say a history book. Is that all right? Or is that
it is all right.
No-no?
You're a deserted island, so you get to take the one that you want.
I wish I could take my history books, but I think the book I would take is a book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I have not.
Yeah, if you haven't had a read of it, I love it. I think everyone should read it. And again, it's just a pretty simple message about the power of now, this moment, being present. And I think for those of us that love history and spend a lot of time in other centuries, it's a good reminder.
It just sounds like it. Thank you very much. We'll link to that one as well. Well, what's next for you? What are you working on now that you're excited about?
Oh, gosh, always doing lots of projects at the same time. But I suppose that what I'm most excited about at the moment is I also have a Tudor podcast. It's called Talking Tudors. So I launched it last July, and I'm having loads of fun with that and, chatting to lots of great people. So, I'll probably stick with that one.
Well, that's wonderful. Yes, I've been following you actually over there at Talking Tudors, and it is a very fun podcast. So we'll make sure people know how to listen to that as well. Natalie, thank you so much for being here. This has been a delightful conversation exploring Tudor bathing and 16th century soaps. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. It's been lots of fun. Thanks very much.
Don't forget to check out the show notes for today's episode, including links to all of the resources Natalie mentioned in today's talk, including a link over to Nina Michaela's episode where we talked with her about Tudor clothing and her book, The Tudor Tailor. All of that and more can be found inside the show notes at CassidyCash.com/episode 45. That's CassidyCash.com/EP45. That's it for this week here at That Shakespeare Life. I'm Cassidy Cash, that Shakespeare girl, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard.
Thank you for listening to That Shakespeare Life. As always, the best conversations happen after the episode over at CassidyCash.com. Become a part of a vibrant Shakespeare conversation by adding your voice over at the website. Until next time, remember, when you want to know William Shakespeare, you have to go behind the curtain and into That Shakespeare Life.